Welcome to Vampire Radio! Hola, you are listening or watching Vampire Radio. Of course, I'm your hostess with the mostest, Shelly from Kelly. And I'm joined by the lovely podcast dog, Minnie the Moocher. Happy Friday, everyone. How has your week been? Oh my gosh. You know me, crazy Shelly. It's been a time. Here's the thing. Last week, I thought it was real cute. I thought I was going to be able to produce a new episode for you guys. I was not. I have been traveling. I was out of town. It was so awesome. We'll get into that in a little bit, but I was out of town. I thought I was going to be able to make it happen. I could not. I could not make it happen. So deal with it, okay? It was really awesome. I was out of town because I was celebrating somebody's 100th birthday. Thank you very much. And everything that came with that experience, I cherish through and through. Now, for me, I learned so much about myself, others, life, and it's a lot. And then along the way, freaking Ozzy dies, freaking Hulk Hogan dies. So let's get into it, shall we? So it's really interesting. Last night, I did an interview for a show called The Monty and the Pharaoh Show. I'll link everything below. And we were discussing the deaths of Ozzy and Hogan. And when I was sharing my experiences with Ozzy, Pharaoh had brought up a really good point. Now, long story short as I can make it, I have had many experiences, small experiences with Ozzy throughout my life. And if you want to look at it in a deep way, the timeline that has been my career and life-changing experiences. And every single time that I've crossed paths with Ozzy freaking Osbourne, I didn't realize it till last night when I got into the different situations. One was at a Ozfest. Two of them actually were at two different Ozfests. One was the last time I performed at WWE. And another time I totally spaced on last night, but when I was reflecting back today, I was like, dude, this goes even further back. Before, like in between the Ozfests and becoming Ariel and being around him in WWE, there was a time where I was an extra, a featured extra, thank you very much, on this movie called Little Nicky. Are you guys familiar with it? Now let's go back the truck up, beep, beep, real quick. So the first time I ever had a Ozzy experience is something last night I mentioned on the Monty and Pharaoh show. I don't want to get into details because it's really, really personal and spiritual. So there's that. And then the second experience I had was my sister and I are 9 years apart. Okay. So she was pretty young. I can't remember the exact age I was. Whenever Ozfest was at Glen Helen in the early 2000s and Lincoln Park performed there. The whole reason for me to go to this particular Ozfest was because my sister Danielle was such a huge Lincoln Park fan that I had to take her. I had to be that cooler older sister, right? Now, this was me in my little rockabilly heyday and pre-wrestling era. And I, unfortunately, was in this really disgusting, toxic, abusive relationship. Now, I was with this guy from the tail end of my senior year in high school, and then on and off for 5 years, more on than off. And most of those years I spent seriously trying to escape this dude. He had pulled out guns on me. He's pulled out knives on me. So it wasn't as easy. That's why I understand when people are in that kind of toxic relationship. I understand it's not so easy. Like from the outside looking in, it's like, oh my gosh, leave, just leave. And it's not that easy. I wish it was. So it took me 5 years to escape this dude, right? So the second time I had this experience with Ozzy, we were at this Ozfest. We ended up leaving early. We watched Linkin Park, didn't even finish watching Linkin Park. And this boyfriend insisted that we leave because dudes were coming up to me, giving me compliments, telling me how I reminded them of a tattoo girl, like a girl that you would get tattooed on you. And to me, being the rockabilly self that I was, I took it, and I was so insecure at that time. So I took it as this huge compliment that strangers were giving me, telling me that I look like what people choose to put on their skin. Now, at that point, I've already been into modeling and some acting and stuff, but not full force because of that boyfriend. He made sure of it. So he got so jealous that this was going on that we had to leave early. I was so upset. I felt so like just robbed of this Ozfest experience, right? Especially with my sister. And then when we were leaving, there was a big bus coming. And I looked and I see Ozzy. And we had this moment where we made this eye contact. And I cannot tell you how trippy it was, because even though it was for just like a few seconds, me making that eye contact with Ozzy made me have the confirmation I needed that I was going to finally rid of this guy, because I was meant for something bigger. I was meant to not be stuck in this relationship and just let it eat at me away until I'm nothing. That was my sign. And I remember he got this mischievous little smile, and then he like ducked because he wasn't supposed to be in that area. We weren't supposed to be there either. It was this whole thing. So there was that. Then this is something I forgot last night. When I had this non-credited, non-speaking role on the movie Little Nicky, that's when I got to meet Adam Sandler, the guy that played Adrian, and Ozzy was there. Now, in the movie, Ozzy arises when it's the end of the world, and then he turns into a bat. So there was Ozzy. And that shoot of that day, that's what made me realize I had a place in show business. It wasn't just about wrestling. I had a place in show business, and that's part of my purpose and what I'm supposed to be doing. So the next time that I encountered Ozzy was the last time I performed for WWE, because that day, this is when ECW and SmackDown were merged together, and we had shows on the same day. ECW would go first and then SmackDown. I think that's how it was, or it was the other way around. I can't remember. So anyways, Ozzy was going to be performing there for SmackDown. I ended up hanging out with his band and him for a little bit throughout the day. And his band members were so intrigued by my Ariel character that after the show was over, after their part was over for the show and Ozzy had already left, they were like, "We're staying because we want to see you perform." Now, this is my infamous day where I got into the backstage fight with Batista. And one of the things that made me really stick to my guns and stick up for myself in that moment without even thinking twice is when I finally escaped that toxic boyfriend in my early 20s, I told myself if anyone or anything ever made me feel that way again, it wasn't for me. And so for the first time, I had somebody make me triggered to the energy of that toxic relationship I had. So that's why I was so like, no, and wasn't backing down and whatever. And so last night when I was sharing all this, Pharaoh was like, it sounds like whenever you're in these, I forget how he worded it, but pretty much saying these life-changing moments, Ozzy was there. It was such a cool conversation. Go check it out. I linked it below. Anyways, but what I forgot last night, like I mentioned, is the Little Nicky, because at Little Nicky, I was still trying to escape that boyfriend. He was almost out of the picture, but not quite. And then that's when I started to really pivot and own my energy. And something else that I did share last night on the show was that's what wrestling did for me. And that's why when wrestling, I felt betrayed by it. It hurt me in such the deepest, rawest way, because wrestling saved me from this dude. And when I say that, I mean, you know, he was physically abusive as well as mentally, right? And when I started wrestling, there were dudes who would try to stiff me in the ring during training to see if I was really there just to like try to be on TV or something, or if I was really there to like learn. Old school mentality. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just old school. That's where I came up in the wrestling business. So I learned how to protect myself. And not only that, I learned how to give it back. So the first time that when this dude, this relationship I was with, I fought back and was able to protect myself, there was a moment I saw where he was just like shocked. He couldn't believe it. And that's why I rode so effing hard for wrestling, because it gave me the confidence within myself to finally not just leave that relationship with that first step of like, F you, dude, no. And that was truly the beginning of the end of finally escaping that guy. And it's such a trip that Ozzy would pop up throughout that timeline. We talked about Ozzy, so now let's talk about Hogan. Now, of course, I got asked about what my feelings were last night, right? And I say this with all due respect, okay? If you are somebody that's listening or watching this, chances are you have watched or listened to my content in the past. And I've been very vocal for many, many years that I didn't really care for Hogan. I didn't like him. And what made me have that opinion was when I was around him a few times, I'm so sorry to say this. I'm not trying to be disrespectful or anything like that. I just didn't get a good vibe. And then I start hearing stories firsthand from people involved at times. And I'm like, see, dude, I knew I didn't get a good vibe, but I didn't know the guy. So can I really say, I don't know, especially people change. Man, I've had my eras of being a complete douchebag. And there's probably people out there that are like, Shelly's a complete bitch and a douchebag. And they're right. The version of me they knew, yeah, I was going through it. So I try to give people some grace, right? But it feels weird, dude. It feels weird that Hogan passed away. It is so weird. And what I know, there's people online and they're all fighting, and I get it. And that's like the internet is a release for people to vent how they feel. And I get that too. So it's kind of like this like chaotic thing. And I don't know. The whole thing is weird. I don't know how to feel about it. I feel bad that I didn't really like the guy. I don't know. God bless. That's my thoughts on it. Do with it what you will. Let's get into a little bit of music, shall we? Kicking off this first block of music, we have Tribe Track with Community. right, we started with Tribe Track. We ended with Tribe Track. This time we had the last train north. We started with Community, last train north. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. And if you would like to check out any of these bands that I played today, of course, all of their links are in the description. So if you tuned into the last episode of Vampire Radio, oh my goodness, it was such a struggle because I was having so many editing problems, like, oh my gosh. But here's the thing. I could sit here and go and bore you guys with the details, but the silver lining of all of the trouble, the drainage, the overwhelmingness, everything that came with trying to put the last episode together is I learned a lot more about Adobe Premiere, which is what I use to edit. So even though it was a headache, and even though there's some things I still have some grievances with Adobe Premiere, I also discovered some really cool things that's going to help my content creating. So there's that. So a really long time ago, a friend of mine sent me this really cool video. I should have watched it before I hit the record button right now, but it was a rabbi talking, and I can't remember if it was a lobster or a crab. Either way, I think it was a crab. Maybe it was a lobster. I don't know. But the point is he was using the analogy of when the crab /or lobster looks for a bigger crab or shell to live in. It has to get uncomfortable first in its shell to where the muscles are like pushing up against the shell, making it so like physically uncomfortable to where it needs to go look for another shell that's bigger to fit what it's now growing into. And that's something that has always stuck with me, even though that's why I should know if it's a lobster or a crab. I think it's a crab. And it's so effing true, dude. And not just with last week's episode, but just like everything that's been going on in my life for years now has made me so uncomfortable. So uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable in my own shell. But I have to be to break through to find the shell that can be my new home that has space for me to grow. And that's just where I'm at right now. And I feel after everything that's been going on, especially after this past year, I think I finally found a shell that I can now grow in, and I'm really excited about it. Part of that uncomfortableness was I had a total meltdown on the last Smokeout. I'll link it below. Total meltdown. So many F-bombs. I was so over it. And I feel that was one of the final stages of me breaking out of my old shell. And it had to happen. And it sucks. But I'm glad that it happened the way it did, because I feel that there's probably people that watched it either when it was live or the replay, that it's going to help in one way, shape, or form. And that's what I'm in the business for, is if I can share my story just to help other people feel, if not for nothing, not alone, then my job is done. You know what I'm saying? Have you guys seen the Gladiators documentary on Netflix? I know it's kind of old news. Oh, it is no old news by now. But OM to the G, let's just talk about it for a second, can we? So the first time I watched this documentary was actually last year, so I was late to the game. But it was so well done, from the storytelling to hearing about the behind the scenes of something that was very influential to my childhood, to be honest with you. And then seeing how the people at Netflix edit it together. If you don't know, now you know. One of the many jobs I have in life is I'm a video editor. I've been a video editor for a really, really long time, over 10 years at this point. Not just for my own content, but for other people's content and for companies. So when I say the way they edited the Gladiators documentary on Netflix, like, that's the mind space that I'm coming from when I say that. And let's not even get started on how they incorporated the animation to go along with whether they were telling stories or it was the transitional shot from point A to point B. So well done. And for me, being an athlete pretty much my whole life, it was so cool to hear the behind the scenes stories from these people, like from the horse's mouth. You know what I mean? To me, it really reminds me of back in the day when I used to be totally obsessed when WWF had those VHS tapes and it would show you the different superstars and whether they would take you back to their hometown, show you the roots of where they came up in wrestling by photos or videos, whatever. That's what this documentary really kind of connected with me as far as hearing that backstory, because me being a fan watching when WWE or F at the time had these videos, what was it called before they were superstars? Remember that? When I would watch it, I would connect with these different people who I was seeing them just as these characters in wrestling, but they became humanized to me, and not just from a fan to wrestler ratio, but the fact that I was already in modeling and acting. And so I connected, even though I wasn't where I wanted to be with wrestling yet, or maybe not even at that point yet. Hearing these people's stories, it resonated with me. And that's exactly what happened with the Gladiators Netflix documentary. In particular, Lori Fetrick, who plays Ice, I really connect with her. And here's the thing, seeing her from back in the day footage, I'm just like, oh my gosh, it does something to me. It like activates this part of me. It's so effing crazy. Same thing with Nitro, which is really interesting because back in the Disney brother sister, I was a part for not full time, but just like here and there, a promotion here in town, and it was a school called UPW, Ultimate Pro Wrestling, and they were really connected not only with WWF but with just gigs here in town for like stunt work and things like that. So it was a good company to get in on back in the day, especially here in SoCal, where wrestling on the independent level was really scarce. You know what I mean? Like, people don't realize that. You guys are spoiled over there in the Midwest and other countries and on the East Coast because it just, the presence was so kayfabe, brother, sister here in SoCal back in the day. I just remember watching those before they were stars, and it pushed me to want to be a wrestler all that much more. So going back to the Gladiators documentary on Netflix, and specifically seeing Ice and Nitro, it, like I said, activated something. And going back to UPW, I kept having this memory of meeting Nitro at UPW. So I became obsessed. I wrote on Instagram to Nitro. I wrote to Rick Bassman, who was the owner of UPW, and Bassman got back to me and he said that he had Nitro there at a couple shows behind, like backstage or whatever. So it made sense. So it's so interesting to me how I have a really good memory. I remember a lot. So when I don't remember pivotal I can't even talk, pivotal moments in my career or in my life or people who inspired me or whatever, and Nitro was one of those people that he did something to my soul when I would watch Gladiators, dude. Him and freaking Ice, I'm telling you, I don't know what it is. I'm still trying to figure it out. Bottom line is, so life presented me to be in the presence of this dude at UPW, you know, and it's just, it trips me out. And I want to do a rewatch because I only watched it the one time, and I feel going back, much like my 90 Day Fiancé Last Resort, it's like when it's brand new, it kind of can be overload of information. So like when you kind of already know the story and then you revisit it, at least for me, I'll kind of discover different parts I didn't catch the first time because it was overload the first time. So going into it knowing a lot of the details. So stay tuned on that. I need to do a rewatch and then do a review here on Vampire Radio. What do you guys think? You know, recently, I would say in the last 6 months or so, I've been really posting more on my social media, specifically on X, wrestling related kind of stuff, right? Which has landed me to be invited to different people's podcasts and things of that nature and collab with people where I'm talking about wrestling, specific events in wrestling for some of these. And so it's been so interesting to me because enjoying wrestling again after everything I've gone through with wrestling, like from the good, the bad, and the ugly, like it's a freaking lot, dude. That's why I lost my mind many times over, right? So now that I'm at a place where I can just be like enjoying it and being a fan at moments again, that to me is really important. And collabing with people or doing interviews with people and them asking questions and me paying more attention to the current products that are out there. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I'm seeing a lot of people finally getting their TV time that I always believed in and always felt like they deserved TV time, but for whatever reason, it just didn't pan out back in the day. And now they're just shining and it's so freaking cool to see. So how can I not want to see what these people are up to by catching up on the products that are out there now? And it's so cool that there's different companies now, different options, different styles, different vibes. And it's so crazy because I've been so lost in the yay, I love wrestling again vibes that it kind of takes me back that I've gotten some haters from it. People being like, oh, she just started watching again. Like, what does she know? I was in the wrestling business for 17 years, so I kind of think I know what I'm talking about here when I voice my opinion on certain things or whatever. That's what I know, actually. That's what I know. And just hearing the snarky little comments and things that get back to me and people having their little opinions of like almost treating me like I'm jumping on some kind of like wrestling bandwagon. And it's like, and these people who have been real vocal about it tend to be people who, even though now they have a career or they can make money online talking about wrestling or whatever, it's like you were never in the business. You were always just a fan and you found a way, which is so cool, to make money as a fan by talking about wrestling or whatever. So what's the freaking problem here? Like, I was in the wrestling business for 17 years. Just because I stepped away from it for a while and then decided that I'm actually enjoying myself watching the products now or revisiting old school stuff. Like, what's the problem? Why is it okay for fans to be out there talking, whether they have a podcast or they interview people or they just post online, whatever it is? Why is it now this acceptable thing that fans are now invading my world, thinking they know everything, and some of them making money, but me lending my voice from experience and being talent, so I know what I'm talking about? And now it's like, oh, she just started wrestling. What is she talking about? Oh, this and that. Ugh. Like, gag me with the effing spoon real quick right now because it is so upside down. I just can't. But I don't let that energy F with me in the sense of I still enjoy watching what I watch. I choose to watch what I watch. I don't have little things in the works and like I have to politic and like this, that, and the other. I'm just literally a person that's been doing content creating since the early 2000s. DesireLive.com, shout out. Like, this is nothing new for me. So people could have their little opinion. That's fine. If you really want to dig deep, go ahead. I've been doing this for a very long time. Have a seat, relax. It's going to be okay. And bottom line is, the ones that run their mouth the most about me are people that are making more money online than I am. So it doesn't make sense. It's like, you are making more money than me online. So what's the problem? I don't know about you, but I can definitely go for some more music. So let's kick off another block of music, and we're going to start with Mood Ring by National Sweetheart. And that's the last song of the day. And guess what? The title of the song is That's the One by Ryan McCaffrey. If you like any of the music that I played today, again, make sure to check it out. I linked everything below in the description. All right. So once again, I suck. Okay. I do not have a 90 Day Fiancé The Last Resort review because I went out of town. I was gone. Life's been crazy. Hopefully this weekend will be the weekend where I'll rewatch it. Hey, everything happens for a reason, so I'm not even going to stress out about it. So hopefully next week I will have a update for you on the 90 Day Fiancé The Last Resort. Well, it's kind of late, like not super late, but like 7-ish. Yep, 7 o'clock. It's 7 o'clock, so I got to go walk Minnie and then edit this together, put it up for you guys, then stream it. So I have a lot to do tonight. But I just want to say before I let you go, I hope you have a good weekend. You guys got to stay safe out there, stay hydrated, stay aware, pay attention, and remember, I'll be back next week, next Friday, here on Vampire Radio to entertain all you fine people in hopes to make you smile, make you laugh, maybe even make you cry. But at the end of the day, you'll walk away saying, I had a fun time. Until then, I'm Shelly from Cali. She's the podcast dog, Minnie the Moocher, and we'll be smelling you guys later. Adios. Hurry back, and remember to bring your death certificates. Hurry back.
You a little bit nervous today?
Feel great.